enough of the leaflets today. You know, that's the reality of the situation. That's not something that's laid down from the economics of the present situation. I'm not trying to wish away these things. I'm not trying simply to be voluntarist about it. But this really makes a difference about what happens in society or not. And we know that the big political questions are posed in this way. You see, for the Unison leadership, their links with the Labour Party meant that they ran away from the potential of heading up resistance at a time of recession and deep economic crisis. They ran away from it because they didn't want to embarrass Gordon Brown, and they didn't believe that the way to fight was to have workers fight themselves, but to hope that Gordon Brown would run to their aid. So they pulled away the strikes as soon as there was a possibility to do so. They ended those strikes as soon as it was the big local government strike. As soon as the strike had been held, they rushed immediately to binding arbitration to choke it off. A terrible decision, which will have terrible implications for the future. We know that in the health service they pushed through a 3-year deal, which will mean that there won't be the possibility, unless it can be reopened from below, of workers fighting to protect themselves, not only over pay, by the way, but over cuts and privatisation and other issues during this very, very important time that's coming up. And therefore, we have to think about how we can help this process to go on. Not simply to turn the ballots into action, but what then happens in the action. If you think about the London bus workers dispute at the moment, extremely important, and here we have workers who are consistently still refusing to accept 4.5% pay deals. Very, very important at the moment, the workers are fighting about that. And it can't just be about pay, it's also about respect, it's also about the sense of value that you have at work, it's about the hours at work, it's about whether you're driven too hard by the boss and so on. Very, very important that people are fighting that. It's not simply about making the ballots, winning the ballots, but then fighting inside the organisation of it to make those into reality. If we think about the Dover docks dispute that's just happened, I was there last week, and you see how close you are to the potential for victory. You have 150 dockers and their supporters stood outside the port of Dover, and every 2 seconds a lorry is going past. And you know that if you could just block the road for 5 minutes, you would stop the port. And okay, the cops would arrive in large numbers and there'd be a fracas, but in the end, after half an hour, they'd get it open. But what an example that would be, and what news that would be, if you closed the port for half an hour during their present dispute over outsourcing. And workers shuffle into the road with their placard, unsure whether they should do it or not. And one of the union officials says, come on, let's do it. And the other ones say, no, no, Peter, keep back, you mustn't do it. And, you know, we're there with them, and the people are... And you're so close to that potential for doing it. And then, this week, the union officials said, well, maybe we'll go for it. Maybe we'll go for it on Wednesday of next week. Maybe we'll go for it. And we'll have a mass picket. We'll even let you come. You could get arrested, but, you know... and then on Friday, yesterday, talks have seen the strike called off for Monday, and possibly for Wednesday as well. But, you know, that's very close. Now, how do we react to this? It can't simply be about organising at work, the workplace, important though it is. You see, all the examples I gave are not simply about the crisis leads to strikes. There's often, the political is the crucial question inside that, and not just the strike question, but the demonstrations, the meetings, the protests, all of these things are crucial. So that we don't have to simply talk about what happens at work. We have to think about the other things that are absolutely crucial at times of crisis. Can we get a movement over the question of repossessions? Of course, the government has had to move some way over this, but still tens of thousands of people will be repossessed. And they will be repossessed by the nationalised banks. Brown Bank, Northern Rock, or HBOS, will chuck people out of their homes. Can we get a movement over the other questions raised by the economic crisis? The attacks around benefits, for example, the attacks upon single parents and upon people on disability benefit and incapacity benefit, the attacks upon those. Can there be a movement around that? Can there be a movement that brings together the questions of economic recession and the question of the war? That still huge amounts of expenditure can be funneled into the charnel house of Iraq and Afghanistan even at a time that they say there's no money for public services and those who work from them? Can we get a movement around the questions of unemployment at a time when there are hundreds of billions for the bankers? Why are there hundreds of billions for the bankers and yet there's no money to save the jobs of those in the car plants, to save the jobs of people in so many of those areas that are being swept away at the moment? Now, these are very, very important. They're not simply industrial questions. These are political questions. That's why we initiated this People Before Profit Charter in an attempt to have a broad response to the recession, to say that what we need to do is to organise not simply in the workplace, but across workplaces and inside the working class movement to raise the level of political revolt against the system. Now, you see, none of us know, none of us can be sure where the spark will come. And a lot of the time, we will push for things and we won't get the action we want. You will go to a group of workers and say, it's time to fight, and they will say, we're not sure. Will this imperil our redundancy money if we fight? Does this mean that we'll be marked down as people who won't get a job the next time round if there are some jobs going? Won't we be known as the militant in the factory and therefore will be forced into long periods of unemployment? That will happen most of the time. But it's also true that sometimes you will touch a nerve. So, for example, in Merthyr, next Wednesday there'll be a big meeting in Merthyr, town in South Wales, just up from the valley from Cardiff, where the convener from Hoover will come to a meeting organised by the People Before Profit Charter, together with the convener from L'Oréal and other factories that's closing as Flantrisant in the next valley along, together with the local Labour councillor, together with someone from Plaid Cymru and someone from the Socialist Workers Party who will speak together in Merthyr. Now that's very, very important that that's happened, organised by the People Before Profit Charter. We need more meetings like that. We need to, because out of those meetings can come the possibility of resistance, of people who are capable of fighting back, of organising the demonstrations, of organising pressure upon the politicians, and of going further to the possibility of the occupations that we saw in the 1970s in Upper Clyde shipbuilders, that we saw in the 1980s in Lee Jeans and other places, of the possibility of people fighting in ways that can be really effective and beginning to electrify the sense of resistance against the effects of the recession. This is why, to go back to the quote from Trotsky, you need more than simply to say the crisis will or won't mean people will fight, and you need more than simply talking about organisation on the trade union level. The trade union level is crucial. The organising at work is absolutely crucial, but we need something more than that politically. And as well as the political drawing together of a united front around the questions raised by the recession, of trying to get people to fight together in an organised way around it, we need to think to challenge politically the hold of labourism upon people. Because, of course, in every struggle that will happen at the moment, this will emerge. Isn't it true that Gordon Brown is doing at last the proper Labour thing at a time of recession? If you look at the response to the pre-budget announcement by Derek Simpson or by Dave Prentice, for example, you will see a celebration of a return to the genuine Labour roots. At last we have a proper Labour government that by 2011, if it's still in office, will put taxes up a little bit for people on over £150,000. And I'm not underestimating, actually, the ideological shift that Labour has had to do to even do that much that New Labour has had to do. But you have to fight a struggle. Are we then simply going to rely on Gordon Brown to get us through this situation? Or do workers need to fight through their own strength, through their own unity, through their own solidarity forged across the working class? These are the crucial questions we face. Because we have to fight against the pessimism that thinks that nothing is possible at the moment, but not simply in an ideological way. We have to break down that realisation into organisation. We have to turn into the reality of meetings, of protests, of strikes and occupations, our understanding that workers can fight, and that this is the only way to both fight against the economic crisis, but also to lay the basis for the sorts of struggles which can show how we can achieve a society that does away with booms and slumps and ends the rule of profit.